If you're waiting to be ready before starting your first D&D campaign, you might never start. New DMs often quit after the first session, or sometimes even before. This is meant to get you in the game, keep you in the game, and keep you and your friends having fun at the D&D table. In this video, we're going to cover the things you're going to need for your first session, how to survive the session even when things go off the rails. And trust me, things will go off the rails. By the end of this video, you'll be ready to run your first session. Welcome to StoryForge DM, where I help you become the best DM you can possibly be. You guide your players the right way, you stay in the game, and you run campaigns just like I have for the past 15 years. I'm proud to say that my group and I have been together just that long, and I want to help you achieve the exact same awesomeness. We're going to start out by talking about what the DM really does. First and foremost, the DM is not the rules encyclopedia. You've got tons of people and friends at the table that can help you look up rules as you're moving the story along. The other thing that the DM is absolutely not is a novelist. It's not necessary for you to sit there and read the story out for everybody to follow along. Remember, everybody at the table is working together to get the story moved along and to realistically have fun. And that's what your number one job is as DM. It's to facilitate the fun. To facilitate the fun adequately, what you're going to want to do is present situations. That's the real thing that the DM is going to do. You present the situations and you let the players do as they're going to do. And that's where things can get crazy and get derailed. But that's half the fun. Players get to make choices along the way. And of course, these choices could yield good results or possibly catastrophic ones. But at the end of the day, what you're doing as you're helping them is you're guiding them to build the story together. The 4, 5, 6, 8, however many people are at the table, the lot of you are going to work together to make this story an awesome thing. Let me put it this way. If you can describe a situation, have the players react, and have fun at the table, you can DM. Now, let's talk about what you actually need for session 1. You don't need a full story, just a plot. Some hooks to get your players engaged and involved. It's good to come prepared with a handful of NPCs. Perhaps you scribble out some names, races or species, and put them down on a list so that you can pull them out of a hat when you need them. You can use these NPCs to help guide your players along in the story as well. And feel free to remind your players that they can always go back to the NPCs and friends that they've met along the way to try and get answers. This will help get your players involved and get your players having a taste of what it's like to understand and become their character. Oftentimes, it's great to start with one problem to solve. Perhaps they're starting in a small village and they've talked to some of the elders at the village, or maybe there's been a raid at night, or maybe there's been bandits on the road. One problem to solve is a great place to start. And of course, you can do this with homebrew if you want to make it up as you go. Or you could pick one of the campaigns that are done or one of the adventures that are done already and have it as a one-shot. It's a great way to get characters in the game, get them started off, and of course, DM for your PCs. Some props you might want to use are at least some references, as you could get some cue cards, and you could write down some of the ideas or quicker rules that, may be coming up often. You can use them for yourself, but you could also write them up for your PCs if you wanted and hand them out. And then if your PCs had questions about them, of course they can always go back to the rule book to try and expand or elaborate. But maybe it's a good idea to have a couple of those things available. Also, it's a really good idea to make sure at least there's a couple PHVs at the table, player's handbook for those who don't know. And everybody should have their own dice, at least the dice they need to play their character. I gotta make it really clear. You don't need a full world plan. You don't need to know all the details. You don't need all those little finite pieces. Because as you play with the PCs, as you play with the characters at the table, they're gonna come up with some of these things on their own. They're gonna meet NPCs, maybe new ones that you brought in, maybe ones you've had pre-set up, but they're gonna meet these NPCs and work with them to help build the story. A couple more things that you don't need, but that could be cool, are voices. You don't need to have special voices for each character, although I like to do that. It gives people something to hang on to when they're talking to or interacting with that particular NPC, but you don't need it, just for what it's worth. At the end of the day, it's about getting to the table and having fun. And as long as you can get your PCs at the table there, that's what you really need. let's talk about when players go off of script. Because believe you me, it will happen. I want to tell you something from the bottom of my heart. If your players go off script, this is not wrong. This is not bad. This is good. This is D&D. They're supposed to go off script. Sometimes a paladin will get really hard up because he has to find that vampire to save the town, even though that vampire is dramatically higher level and will probably get the party killed. That's where your NPCs can come into play. Maybe a cleric comes in, a particular NPC cleric comes in and says, hey, I've got this task for you that's going to help you defeat the vampire. We got to get this magical stake first. And, that can help them level up and make the way on. And you know what? If that particular vampire in this analogy is way too high level, perhaps while they're getting the stake, when they get back, they're like, hey, good job. Here's your payment for getting the stake. Just so you know, my boss, the priest of the tower, went and killed the vampire for us, so we don't have to worry anymore. But there's some lesser vampires over here. And that's how you can kind of keep the story rolling along. Big part of D&D is improv. And really, that's what's going to come out at the table. As the DM, it is your job to improv, but don't let it stress you out. Realistically, everybody at the table wants to succeed, wants to have fun, and wants you to have fun. Because without you, they're going to have no game to play. So some of the things that we can focus on when we're improvising is, number one, what does the NPC want? So if they're talking to the barkeep, what does the barkeep really want? Maybe he wants them to find those bandits on the road and help the town. What stands in the way? That can come out in this dialogue as well. So you could say, I may go do it myself because I've got some friends of mine that are, pretty powerful, but they're off on another quest, so I can't lean on them right now. And maybe that's part of the dialogue that comes into determining whether or not you take the job or your PCs take the job rather and move along. Now, another big piece of the improv is what happens when they succeed or fail. So perhaps this barkeep is going to say, you know what, if you do this for me, I'm going to pay you 50 crowns or 50 gold or whatever term you want to use for money. And maybe he'll give you a free stay at the inn for the next little while, giving your PCs a sort of bastion that they can work out of or the like. Let me just emphasize this. The best moments at the D&D table are going to be the ones that you didn't plan for. When they're going to go off the rails, it's actually a good thing. This is D&D. I want to jump into some of the mistakes that new DMs make and what you can do to avoid them. Number one, and I have trouble with this one a lot, try not to apologize so much. Oftentimes, a new DM sitting at the table will be like, oh, I gotta look up this rules, I'm sorry, or I gotta do this, I'm sorry. There's no need. Everybody at the table wants you to succeed. So instead of, apologizing while you do it, you could also delegate, right? So you could say to your PCs, hey, you know what? I can't remember the rule for Fireball, so you're casting Fireball. Why don't you look up how Fireball works, and we'll jump to the next person in the initiative order. And that way, it keeps the story moving along. You didn't have to apologize. You got people at the table that can help out. Another thing you want to avoid big time is controlling players' choices or actions. It's their character, not yours. And it's the lot of your story, not yours. So as a DM, you don't want to say, okay, well, your character decides he's going to stay at this inn and do that. No, let the character choose. Let the person choose what their character does, rather. So let them say, hey, you know what? I want to stay at this inn. Okay, no problem. Maybe you remind them that, oh, that's a dangerous inn. You remember what happened the last time you stayed there in the fight. Maybe you don't want to stay there. Or perhaps you have an NPC say the same thing, or one of the other player characters at the table say the same thing. But let them kind of talk out what happened and be ready to say, okay, great. You stay at the inn. It's been a good night. You wake up in the morning. What do you guys do? And I just want to remind you, or rather say, one of my favorite things to say in order to recapture the attention on the table, get people re-engaged again, is say, okay, guys, what do you do? Now, there's two ways that I like to do this, okay? One is obviously initiative, or two is what we at my table call round table. And we literally go around the table saying, what do you do? Okay, what do you do? Okay, what do you do? What do you do? Go around the table and go back again. That keeps a semblance of order and keeps everybody engaged because they get to decide what their characters are doing, especially when you're in those situations that are out of combat. The last thing I want to remind you not to do is don't compare yourself to the pro DMs online. Honest to goodness, it's not fair to you and it's not fair to the players. Everybody starts somewhere, just like you watching this video. You don't have to be a pro right off the hop. Lord knows I wasn't, and quite frankly, neither were my PCs, and it will be the same for you. You, as a new DM, are going to have new PCs likely at the table, and if not, if they're seasoned or veterans, then great, they can help you with the rules so that things don't get mixed up. The other thing I want to mention is your table is not a performance. Although it's tons of fun to go over the top and have lots of acting and improv moments, which is great, and if your table loves it, then that's great, I want to remind you it's not a performance. So nobody's judging you or critiquing you or thinking, oh, you know, this was good acting or improv or this was bad acting or improv. That's not what it's about. What it's about, like I said from the beginning, is having fun and make sure everybody at the table has fun as well. Lastly, I want to hammer home the number one goal of session 1. Your number one goal is to end the session with everybody wanting to come back. Let me start with things that aren't really going to drag them back to the table. Flawless pacing, you know, making sure the story runs along, that's not really going to do it. Sure, it's important, but it's not the make or break. Knowing the rules inside and out, also not make or break. I've already mentioned it once, I'll mention it again. You got 4, 5, 6 people at the table. They can help you along the way. Or lastly, an epic story. Everybody's working together to make the story. The epic story that you're creating isn't necessarily what's going to bring them back. Let me tell you the things that will. Number one cool moment per player. Everybody deserves a minute in the spotlight or a second with the microphone. Make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk. And you know, as the facilitator of fun, the dungeon master, make it a point to ensure that people don't interrupt one another. The players shouldn't be interrupting one another. Everybody should have an opportunity to have fun, play, and get to know their character. So again, one cool moment per person. The other thing that'll be a really big piece of the puzzle that will help get people back, everybody has a big laugh. One big funny laughing moment at the table. Now, it doesn't have to be guaranteed, but if you've had that, you won as a DM for that session for sure. The last thing, the third thing, is one unresolved question. Now think about this for a second. What if there was a question that was unresolved, like let's say the vampire is taking down townsfolk still, or we don't know how to get the stake, that magical stake that we need to dig out the vampire. One unresolved question within the game is definitely going to bring players back. If you can strive for those 3 things, or at least 2, say, of those 3 things, as a DM, I'm telling you right now, you will win. Your players will want to come back, and you are on the road to being the best DM that you can. I just want to remind you guys, Dungeon Masters aren't born, they're forged. And that's why we at StoryForge DM here are going to send you a new video every 2 weeks. Subscribe, drop some comments in. I would love if you dropped a comment with one of your first session, or maybe 2 of your first session fears, because I'd love to help you answer them and maybe we can come to a resolution together. The other thing I want to let you know is tune in for episode 2. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to be talking about understanding the role of the DM. We're going to dive deep into what it really means to run a campaign and what your job really is. Thanks for tuning in, and I can't wait to see you guys again.